The popular tabletop experience known widely as Warhammer 40,000 is, by some definitions, a game. And regardless of how you feel about that particular statement, we as gamers have a contractual, nay, moral obligation to complain incessantly about whatever we voluntarily elect to spend our free time doing. So let's dive into some reviews of Warhammer 40,000 and see exactly what people are complaining about the current edition of the game this time around. And who knows, we might even disagree with some of them. What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and today we're going to be headed over to the tabletop gaming echo chamber that is Board Game Geek. We're going to read some reviews of experts of other tabletop games trying their luck with Warhammer 40,000. As a reminder, do all the YouTube stuff, click the like button, subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing a giveaway at 40,000 subscribers because that's the meme number for a Warhammer 40k channel. And let's get into reviewing the review. So here we go, a bunch of reviews from the 9th edition Warhammer 40k listing in order from least deranged to absolute pants on head.
Comments after only one 500 game, likely to change after more plays. I feel like it's very inelegant. Every rule has 10 exceptions. You need to purchase separate codexes for every army you want to play. In-game it means you just have to believe everything your opponent tells you his/her army does. Then there are balance updates, which mean the expensive rulebook is outdated before you buy it. I can't imagine getting any of my friends into it because of all of those roadblocks. Shame, because I enjoy the painting hobby part. Maybe I should try Kill Team.
That last comment might actually be the most deranged one in this entire video. Got him! Unfortunately, one 500-point game isn't a great metric to judge a deep hobby game like Warhammer 40k. That lack of new player accessibility is a big downside of the system for sure. And the callouts about how toxic the codex system is are all based and accurate. Toxic enough apparently to score the game a 0 out of 10. Maybe. I don't know how this works. I don't know enough about Board Game Geek reviews, but this is the only one without a little number in the symbol off to the left. I'm just gonna assume that this user was mad enough about the whole codex thing to use imaginary placeholder values instead of totally Chad integers in their rating. Totally understandable.
Glad I tried it, but this is just a massive money sink and the game itself boils down to rolling dice. There is some really cool lore in the Warhammer universe, and I can see people enjoying collecting and painting the minis, but this is a rabbit hole that I have zero interest in exploring. A
big problem with Warhammer 40k's system is that the tactical complexity of the game doesn't become apparent until higher levels of play. There's army list imbalance, improper terrain, correct scenario play, and a baseline rules knowledge that all have to be graduated first before your decisions on the tabletop feel really meaningful. And that's not a great way to onboard new groups or players to the game and make it feel like a rewarding experience. Still rated the game 5 out of 10, but still pretty accurate review.
Boring game with awful mechanics, not worth the cost, which is very high.
Whether 40k is a boring game kind of depends on your opponent. Awful mechanics, it does have those, and a high cost. Based review, very accurate, 3 out of 10, way to go.
I love the universe and have enough fun to play, but I gotta wonder how much of that is just cool lore and my sunken cost/time/effort just to learn the game and make an army. I'm not the most seasoned player, I've only played about a dozen games, but mechanically this game is just complex, but specifically in a bloated, inefficient way. The sheer amount of time it takes to learn the core rules and your own army, let alone any of the others your opponents might use, are just daunting. I know some appreciate the depth, but personally I just don't have hours and hours to play a game all the while trying to remember all the rules. Oh, and Games Workshop, the company that makes Warhammer, has gotten really into anti-consumer practices, so be cautious entering into this game.
The mechanical bloat of Warhammer 40,000 is a big problem with the game. So many rules have random exceptions to prevent specific interactions from happening, or they plug loopholes that no longer exist. And they're all hard to remember. The anti-consumer practices of the game's parent company are also problematic, but this review still scored a 6 out of 10. Overall accurate, and it doesn't seem like this player actually dislikes the game.
I can see after investing hundreds of dollars and about 20 to 30 hours of play and research that this game would be enjoyable. After 2 plays I know that it is not for me. Some of the terminology seems off and not accurate. I hate having to roll at least 3 times every time you want to do something.
I appreciate that this user accepts 40k as a lifestyle game that demands a ton of time investment to get into it and really appreciate. still reviewed it a 2 out of 10, which seems a little bit harsh, but I appreciate that they can see how other players could enjoy it. Also, the comment about the combat system is accurate. 3+ rolls for every single attack in the game is too many, and sometimes as many as 5 before rerolls. You could be rolling dice 7 or 8 times before we determine how much damage an enemy model takes. That is too many rolls, GW.
Welcome to 7th edition still. Rule bloat, an ending command point after command point. Layers and layers of complexity. Great for competitive players.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought 7th edition didn't have command points, and that was the big addition in 8th edition. Really difficult to see how 9th edition is like 7th edition when it includes mostly mechanics introduced in 8th edition. Fair points about the complexity of the game, but I'm not sure if great for competitive players is totally accurate in regards to Warhammer 40k. 1 out of 10, overall confusing review.
Sadly, where Age of Sigmar has created a better game from an old and obsolete game like Fantasy Battle, 40k has become unplayable. The entire game is built around this ridiculous command points system that is nothing but a game of gotcha. Play 7th edition, or even better, play Horus Heresy 30k with the 7th edition rules. It's a much better game with a whole lot less gotcha and more gameplay involved.
The just play 7th edition crowd always makes me chuckle, because 7th edition Warhammer 40k was a disgraceful shit show that almost destroyed the entire IP and the community around it. Say what you will about Age of Sigmar, but I don't think the statement that it created a better version of the game than Warhammer Fantasy Battles is entirely accurate. The two games are very different, with AOS acting more like a Fantasy Battle plus 40k hybrid skirmish game than the true rank and flank masterpiece that Warhammer Fantasy was in its heyday. Play A Song of Ice and Fire or Conquest if you want to see what an actual evolution of the rank and flank style of game looks like. 4 out of 10 here, but pretty sure this user was just mad that the state of game design has moved on from the mechanical roulette wheel that was classic Warhammer 40k editions.
An interesting and unique setting and some nice looking but wildly overpriced models is all this game has going for it. What was initially touted with some hope as a streamlined game engine at the beginning of the 8th edition is now suffocating under layers of rules bloat and flavor of the month release creep, complete with $60 day 1 DLCs for its armies these days with their Warzone books. It is complexity without depth, and suffers from the worst aspects of a physically distributed game and an online live service, selling new overpriced physical game books that they immediately render incorrect in a month with patch notes and FAQs. Avoid at all costs, and since it's GW, there will be a lot of costs. There are better ways to spend your time and money.
This review is from last year when the Warzone problem was in full swing, with codexes literally releasing simultaneously with additional rules from Warzone books that made them super duper broken. Right now, those supplements aren't quite as relevant as they were upon release, so we don't feel that crunch quite as much. But with Ark of Omen, which is I'm pretty sure the name of the new narrative season, on its way, we could return to that lawless hellscape of new supplement rules being constantly released for the game. 1 out of 10 here, but this review feels harsh, but fair.
Almost no strategy in 2,000-point games when the armies are highly unbalanced. The game is a hilariously large Warfest pushed by dudes who enjoy more assembling the miniatures and painting them than playing the actual game. And it's a bad joke how expensive this game is, but Games Workshop managed to create an egg-beard fanbase who will buy anything at this point. It could be a very bad game, but the game is just a pathetic excuse to scam people with the miniatures.
I really want to know who bad touched this guy. Strategy can be robbed from the game if you're playing mismatched lists that aren't designed to play competitively against one another. But that's true of essentially any game that includes this type of pre-game component. Try playing an MTG starter deck against something full of competitive staples, and you'll find out pretty quickly that that's just how this type of game works. And given the large community of players who enjoy the tactical experience of Warhammer 40,000 enough to get their armies commissioned, assembled, and painted, and don't even touch the models until they're fully decked out, the comment about the game only being enjoyed by modelers who don't actually play or know the strategy is just untrue. That said, the comments about the expense and fanboyism of the community are generally accurate. Although, to be fair, players are kicking back on pricing issues and Games Workshop's conduct more and more as time goes on. Apparently a very bad game, but still scored it a 4 out of 10. Review could have used another pass, though. This one's a little confusing.
Please, for the love of all that is good, get rid of the stratagems and command points. Also, Please re-implement universal special rules. Nothing is more ridiculous than having essentially the same rule across all armies with 15 different names. It makes owning multiple armies, which I regretfully do, a massive chore to play. Finally, I really miss the unique feel armies used to have. Now essentially all armies' flavor is limited to only their command point abilities or their special characters boring +1 or -1 buffs. If 10th edition doesn't turn things around, I'm quitting the hobby.
First off, absolutely accurate comment about universal special rules here. They should definitely be reintroduced. But otherwise, hey, it's a appearance from the stratagems are bad crowd. The stratagem system does have its flaws, but I did do a whole video about why stratagems and systems like them are absolutely vital for 40k slowly but surely dragging itself inch by inch out of the stone age of game design, where dice rolls and the unit's raw damage per point were basically the only contributors to the success of a strategy. This is certainly a personal opinion, but I think the flavor of Warhammer 40,000 has never been stronger than it currently is. With faction-specific abilities like combat doctrines and synaptic links, associating how armies function in-universe with how they play on the tabletop more strongly than ever. Stratagems are also a key part of that, with a lot of flavor being packed into things like hate stratagems that are useful against a particular army that your army is historically good at fighting, or war gear stratagems that may not have been mechanically represented in the tabletop game at all. This review is from this past September 2022, so it's not even a knee-jerk from the launch of the edition. Pretty clear that this user is a little out of touch, so I'm not sure the community should be that worried about them quitting in 10th edition, since I'm not convinced they've actually played 9th. All right, here we are, the pièce de résistance. This comment is super long, so I'll probably just put it up on screen so you can read it. The TLDR here is that 9th edition is a good update from 8th, and this guy likes Crusade mode. But the stratagems are bad crowd rears its ugly head once again, but this time with a sprinkling of also terrain keywords are bad too, while somehow believing that force organization is worse. I'm sorry that your loyal 32 Militarum battalion detachment doesn't net you free CPs in this edition, I guess, but maybe that's why he doesn't like the stratagem system. A little weird to complain about command points, while also simultaneously complaining that the force organization no longer gives you enough command points. I'm just confused. I'll admit that the terrain keywords aren't great from a development standpoint. They're verbose and generally poorly worded. But the positive they've had on the playability of the game has been immense. Now it's possible to actually have some of your models survive going second, whereas in 8th edition, which effectively lacked terrain rules entirely, your army would have been shot to death before you got to move a single piece. The insinuation that it's all a grand strategy to sell more GW-produced terrain kits is absolutely hilarious, since those kits generally don't even function well within GW's own rules. They also mention that assigning keywords to your own terrain by yourself is some sort of Herculean effort, but probably missed the part where GW gives you a set of sample keywords for certain terrain types in the core rules. Still appreciate that this is a 5 out of 10 review, but it feels kind of a begrudging score. I bet they would have slapped a 1 out of 10 on it if they didn't like Crusade mode so much. One thing that I appreciate about all of these reviews, and something that may be unique to the board game geek review culture, is that they aren't just one side or another 1 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. There's a lot of nuance within the particular review scores. Now before I wrap up, let's end on a high note and talk about a good review as well. This fella here has been leveling up his hobby and really embracing the game as it was meant to be played. It sounds like they're a little early in their journey to implement more complex rules like stratagems to their games, and while I agree that the rules overload once all of the mechanics are stacked on top of each other is a little intense when you're starting out, I bet they'll pick it up in no time. Good on you, Ken Feldman. I hope you enjoy your journey in the 41st millennium. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Let me know down in the comment section if you like this style of video. Big thanks to everybody for watching all the way to the end of the video. Big thanks as well to everyone who supports the channel either over on Patreon at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise, YouTube channel members, Twitch subscribers. All you people are great. I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.